All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some pretty mind-bending stuff in the world of AI.
Sounds fun.
You know how we've all been using those like crazy smart chatbots?
Yeah.
Like the ones that can like whip up poems or even code? Like it's nothing.
Right.
Well, get this.
Okay.
They can struggle with like seemingly simple stuff like doing math or sorting a list. It's like a world-class chef who can't boil water. You know?
It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it all comes down to how these large language models or LLMs are built.
Right.
They use something called the transformer architecture,
Okay.
which is amazing for processing language.
Yeah.
But it kind of hits a wall when it comes to computational depth.
Reputational depth.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty intense.
Well, think of it like this.
Yep.
You've got a limited number of steps to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what's happening with LLMs.
Okay.
They can only hold so much information in their memory as they're working through a task. So if a task needs like a ton of steps, they might lose track.
So it's not that they aren't smart enough.
Right.
It's more like they have a limited working memory.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like trying to juggle too many things at once.
Yeah.
You can only handle so much before you drop something.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we get around this limitation then?
Well, that's where this really clever technique comes in called chain of thought prompting, or COT for short.
Cool.
T.
Okay.
It's basically like giving the LLM a notepad to jot down its thoughts as it works.
A notepad for an AI.
Yeah.
That's pretty creative.
So instead of just throwing a huge complex problem at it,
Right.
we guide it through smaller, more manageable steps.
Like breaking down a complicated recipe into simpler instructions.
Precisely.
I like
For
cool.
example, instead of asking an LLM to calculate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 all at once,
Right.
we prompt it to first add the ones place, then the tens place, and so on.
So we're kind of teaching it to think step by step like we
Yeah.
do.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
That's pretty cool.
And this approach has shown some pretty remarkable results, actually.
Hold on, before we get to the results.
Okay.
I'm curious about how researchers actually find the best chain of thought for a given task.
Yeah,
It seems like that could get pretty complicated.
it definitely can.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research going on right now to figure this out.
Okay.
It involves understanding the structure of the task and figuring out the most efficient steps for the LLM to take.
I see.
It's kind of like choosing the right algorithm for solving a problem.
Right.
Researchers are looking at two main approaches right now:
Okay.
prompt space and answer space.
Prompt space and answer space.
Yeah.
More technical terms.
Well, they're not as complicated as they sound.
Okay, good.
Think of prompt space as the process of choosing the best steps to guide the LLM,
Wow.
like picking the best recipe or set of instructions.
Got it.
And answer space is about making sure the LLM stays on track as it works through the steps, ensuring that each step brings it closer to the correct answer.
So with the addition example,
Yeah.
prompt space would be like deciding to add from right to left or left to right.
Exactly.
And answer space would be checking that the LLM is carrying over numbers correctly at each step.
You got it.
Okay, I think I'm following.
It's all about finding the most efficient and accurate way to guide the LLM's thinking.
Cool.
Now, about those results I mentioned.
Yeah, tell me, did this chain of thought prompting actually make a difference?
Oh, you bet it did.
Awesome.
Researchers have found that when LLMs are given the right chain of thought,
Mm-hmm.
their performance on tasks like math problems, logical reasoning, even common sense reasoning improves dramatically.
Wow,
In some cases, they even reach near human-level accuracy.
that's impressive.
It seems like this COT technique is a real game changer.
It does.
But is it always reliable?
That's a good question.
Can we just let LLMs come up with their own chains of thought?
Right, like, do we need to be involved at all?
That's a great question, and it brings us to another important distinction: unsupervised versus supervised COT.
Oh, more terms.
I promise it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
In unsupervised COE, the LLM is left to its own devices to come up with its own steps.
Interesting.
This can work sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's often unreliable.
Okay.
The LLM might choose steps that don't quite work or that lead to errors.
So back to our chef who might accidentally put the frosting on before the batter.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, in supervised COE, humans provide the LLM with the right steps to follow.
Okay.
Think of it like giving the chef a detailed recipe to make sure they don't miss any crucial steps.
So humans are still very much in the driver's seat, at least for now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the research shows that this human guidance makes a huge difference.
Makes sense.
For example, one study found that when an LLM was given the right steps for a sorting task, it had almost perfect accuracy.
Wow.
But when left to its own devices, it made a lot more errors.
That makes sense. It's like having a teacher guide you through a difficult concept.
You know,
What are some tasks that you think would really benefit from this kind of carefully guided chain of thought? What immediately comes to mind for you?
Wow, that's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
It really opens up the possibilities. I think anything that involves like a complex sequence of decisions could benefit.
Okay.
Take medical diagnosis, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Guiding an LLM through a series of questions and tests,
Yeah.
that could lead to more accurate and efficient diagnoses potentially.
That's a really good example.
Yeah.
It could like totally revolutionize healthcare.
Right.
What about something like creative writing? Could CoE help an LLM write like a novel or a screenplay?
Now that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
CoT could potentially help with things like plot development and character consistency. But whether an LLM could truly capture the nuances of human creativity, that's still an open question.
It makes you wonder if there are like limits to how much we can guide an LLM's thought process. Could we ever get to a point where they can think creatively or even independently?
Those are some of the big questions that researchers are wrestling with right now.
Yeah.
There are even more advanced variations of code being developed, like tree of thought and graph of thought.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these thought trees and thought graphs.
Okay.
What makes them different from regular CoT?
Well, think of tree of thought as like exploring multiple possible paths to a solution.
Interesting.
It's like brainstorming different approaches to a problem.
Okay.
And then, evaluating which one is the most promising.
So it's like giving the LLM the ability to consider different options.
Yeah.
And make more informed decisions.
Precisely.
Okay, cool.
And graph of thought takes it a step further.
Okay.
By letting the LLM connect different parts of its thought process.
Interesting.
It's like drawing connections between different ideas or pieces of information.
So it's helping the LLM see the bigger picture.
Yes.
And make like more complex connections.
Exactly like building a web of interconnected ideas and relationships.
Wow, these variations of CoT sound incredibly powerful.
They are.
But are there any like drawbacks or limitations we need to be aware of?
Well, even with these advanced techniques, there are still challenges.
Sure.
One of the biggest is the human workload involved in supervised CoT.
Okay.
Developing the right prompts and guiding the LLM's thinking.
Right.
That can be really time-consuming, and it requires expertise.
So it's not a simple plug-and-play solution.
Not quite. It requires careful planning and execution.
Okay.
And even then, LLMs can still make mistakes.
Right.
Especially when they're dealing with, like, ambiguous or novel situations.
Of course. It seems like we're still in the early stages of exploring the full potential of CoT and its variations.
I would agree.
But it's clear that this technique has the potential to significantly enhance the capabilities of LLMs.
Absolutely. It's a very exciting area of research with, far-reaching implications.
So for our listeners who might be new to this whole world of LLMs and chain of thought prompting, what are some key takeaways they should keep in mind? Okay, so let's boil this all down.
Okay.
What are the core concepts our listeners should remember?
All right, so first we got to understand that LLMs, while super powerful, have a limited computational depth.
Okay.
This means they have trouble with tasks that need lots of steps,
It's like they have a short attention span for tough problems.
Exactly. That's where chain of thought prompting comes in, or CoT.
Right.
By guiding the LLM through smaller, easier steps, we can kind of get around that limitation.
It's like we're giving them a roadmap to navigate complex tasks.
Right. And thirdly, human supervision is super important to make sure the CoT is accurate and reliable.
Especially for tricky or nuanced problems.
Yeah, exactly.
How we're not quite at the point where we can just let the LLMs think on their own.
Not yet, at least. But CoT and those variations are like opening the door to some really sophisticated AI reasoning in the future.
This has been a really cool look into the world of AI reasoning.
It has.
Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, as AI keeps getting better and better, the way we interact with it is going to change too.
For sure.
Chain of thought prompting gives us a sneak peek into that future.
Yeah.
Where humans and AI are working together to solve some seriously complex problems.
It's a pretty exciting idea, but maybe a little scary too.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you think about what the future holds for AI and, its role in our lives.
One thing's for sure, it's going to be an interesting ride.
We'll probably be talking about this again as things develop.
For sure.
Big thanks to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into chain of thought prompting.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did.
Absolutely keep those chains of thought flowing.